proposed resolution number 5103 to update your policy for allowing certain signs in certain public locations in the city. And generally these have been temporary banner type signs. Remember, historically they were hung across Carpinteria Avenue. Later, when that opportunity went away, they've been hung on the pool fence. We also are trying to address in this policy our kiosks at the downtown seal fountain area. That's a much smaller area, but also an opportunity for advertising. So we had proposed some parameters largely restricted then as a non-public forum to non-profit organizations that would be advertising services to the community or programs and services that would benefit the community. And it was described in detail on in the draft policy on what types of programs and services that might be. Your council directed us to broaden that slightly. There was testimony from the public that there's certain private recreational uses in town that provide similar benefits as some of the public nonprofit programs that were described, and that those ought to be considered. So we have amended the draft resolution and the policy itself, and I want to walk through that a little bit with you just to illuminate the changes. I'll begin with the cover resolution number 5103 on page 1 of 8. Paragraph E was added, and that states that the city has determined that this is in addition to the prior findings made and the other uses that would be allowed advertising, that has determined that youth-oriented recreational programming such as soccer, baseball, softball, gymnastics, dance, and similar programs, when offered locally through either private businesses or public agencies, provides an important service to the city and benefits its residents. The city also recognizes that those youth-oriented recreation providers require opportunities to make announcements to the community regarding temporary events such as registration periods, tryouts, scholarship opportunities, and the like, in order to ensure that as many local youth as possible have access to helpful recreational activities. Thus, the city has determined that expanding the opportunity to display signs to periodic youth-oriented recreational events would further the intent behind the city's banner policy. So that sets the stage for the policy itself, and I'll take you to that, which is Exhibit A to your resolution, policy for signs on designated city property, and bring you to paragraph 4. It's on page 6 of 8, and the last section, 4.1.3 of that section, says the sign shall, and this is sign contents and subject matter, so this is describing in detail what types of sign, the content that we're going to allow that aren't of a commercial nature but are instead service oriented. The sign shall publicize events or programs intended to benefit the residents or the economy of the city, but not limited to promotion of tourism and or fundraising events, which in turn generate revenue that allows the nonprofit to promote social services to city residents, thereby benefiting the city, as well as promotion of city-sponsored or co-sponsored social and recreational activities and programs, and private or public recreation programs that are available exclusively to persons under the age of 18. So that's an important addition on the end. Also under sign limits, we've made, since we were reviewing this, a few more adjustments. We've attempted to balance what we included in the written policy of your council with rules that might be established by the city manager in carrying out this policy. And you have attached to this report also the sign permit application, which we tried to make generic to any signs that might be applied for on public property where those are allowed. And then we have some specific pool fence banner rules. These we've had for some time that reflected our practice, and we've amended them to not only highlight some of the City Council's policy for applicants, but also to set some basic rules. And it's in here that you'll find the basic rule about the size of the banner. 3 feet in height by 24 feet in length is what we've allowed historically, and would propose to keep that. The weight, we don't want a banner that's constructed material that's difficult for our code or our public works staff to install, so we have a weight limit of 25 pounds, and a whole bunch of other practical rules about, the painting of the banner and who hangs it and when it needs to be picked up and these kinds of things. But we did feel it appropriate in Section 4.2 on sign limitations to formalize some of these limits in your policy. And so in the policy itself, it talks about how often we're going to allow these. In your last policy, you may recall we were talking about 4 times per year, but as we went back and reviewed all the folks that use these, and there's a number of them, over 30, we found that there was at least one or more that used the policy more than 4 times a year already on a regular basis, and we didn't want to eliminate the possibility or reduce the number that those folks were already using it. So we're coming back to you with a number 6 that reflects the history of use of the policy, and seeking to understand if you're comfortable with that and get your direction. Also, the number of times, the number of days that the banner would be allowed, or the sign would be allowed to be put up. We suggest not exceed 14 days. The number of signs, and this also all reflects existing practice or historical practice. It's usual that there be only 1 sign put up at a time, but we have had occasion where we've put up more than 1 sign for organizations that are holding different events at the same time that meet our criteria. In those cases, we've asked and we've gotten compliance that the sign not exceed that stated maximum area of 3 foot by 24. So instead of 1 large sign, they would have 2 smaller signs. And this has all worked in the past, and we would suggest that by formalizing it gives us some strong parameters, and your council a strong basis for the policy overall. Lastly, I just want to mention that we've also made it clear in here that this, under paragraph 5 on page 7, under permit procedures, that the city manager may establish application requirements, rules, or restrictions that he or she determines are necessary in order to implement the subject policy in a consistent and fair manner. So we don't want to be coming back to you with little details on everything in order to amend this policy. We want to give staff some discretion. We're suggesting to create rules, which is done on a normal basis as administrative rules in order to implement your policies in a fair and practical way. If an issue comes up that's serious, a problem, and one of the areas that you're already addressing in your policy, we would certainly come back and address that with your council. So that concludes my report, Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave?
I have just one. On Section 4.5, sign maintenance. We talk about a sign being a nuisance or a public safety hazard, but I think you may want to take them down when they become eyesores as well. Maybe you want to add something in there that allows that.
Yeah, if you, we realize that's possible that a sign could be damaged in the wind, and these things can happen. If you look at the pool fence banner rules, in addition to that policy, it says that signs supplied by the applicant must be in good condition and may be rejected by the city or removed when determined to be a nuisance or represent a hazard to public safety. We could clarify that and run that in the policy, actually make clear that if during the period of time that it's hanging up, that it becomes a hazard, that would be reason for removal. I think that's reflected in the rules, but maybe not as clearly in the policy itself.
Any other questions?
Do we risk discriminating against anybody because we're highlighting youth?
Because we're highlighting youth.
The sign policies that we're implementing here are based on subject matter, so there's no concern of discrimination. The city has a rational basis for recognizing certain individuals need to advertise on the public property. So the city attorney's office doesn't see any discrimination concerns with recognizing a particular subject matter.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
None?
No, that answers